What were the primary causes of 9/11? September 11th, 2001 was a tragic day. It changed the United States, and honestly, it changed the entire world. After 9/11, U.S. security, foreign policy, and global politics were never the same. But this attack didn't just come out of nowhere. 9/11 was the result of years of build-up, bad decisions, and extreme beliefs. Today, I'm going to explain the main causes of 9/11 in order, starting with the earliest causes and moving closer to the actual attack. Osama bin Laden's early influences. To understand 9/11, we first have to understand Osama bin Laden. Bin Laden went to King Abdulaziz University in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, where he studied public administration. While he was there, his beliefs started to change. He was heavily influenced by two people. One was Sayyid Qutb, an Egyptian writer. The other was Abdullah Azzam, a militant leader who later became his mentor. At university, bin Laden was exposed to a very aggressive, militant version of Islam, not how most Muslims understand the religion today. A key example of this is Quran verse 9:5. Bin Laden later used this verse in his 1998 fatwa, where he called for jihad against the United States. The verse talked about fighting enemies during a specific war, but bin Laden only focused on the violent part. He treated it like a general order from God to fight and kill non-believers anywhere, anytime. What he completely ignored was the second half of the verse, which talks about peace, forgiveness, and stopping the fight if the enemy stops. By doing this, bin Laden convinced himself that violence was allowed, even required, even though he was ignoring a huge part of the religion. This was one of the first steps that pushed him towards extremism. Next comes the Afghan War in the 1980s, which played a huge role in creating Al-Qaeda. When the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, bin Laden, influenced by Abdullah Azzam, helped fund and organize Muslim fighters, known as the Mujahideen, to fight against the Soviets. At first, Al-Qaeda wasn't a terrorist group. It was basically a support network. It helped recruit fighters, raise and move money, and send foreign Muslim fighters to Afghanistan. It also helped with training. Bin Laden joined Al-Qaeda mainly because of Abdullah Azzam, who was the main leader of the group at the time. But everything changed in 1989. The Soviets withdrew from Afghanistan, and Abdullah Azzam was assassinated. Instead of shutting the group down, bin Laden took a bigger role and eventually became the leader. Al-Qaeda didn't disappear. It became more dangerous. Bin Laden started believing that Muslim countries were under threat, and that belief leads directly into the next major event. One of the strongest motivations behind 9/11 was the presence of U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia during the Gulf War. In the early 1990s, after Iraq invaded Kuwait, the United States led a coalition to push Iraqi forces out. As a part of that war, American troops were stationed in Saudi Arabia. For most Americans, this didn't seem like a big deal, but for Osama bin Laden, it was a huge problem. Saudi Arabia is home to Mecca and Medina, the two holiest cities in Islam. In bin Laden's view, having non-Muslim soldiers on that land was an unforgivable insult. He believed the United States was oppressing Muslims in the Middle East, and that the U.S. military presence threatened Islamic values and territory. He even claimed his beliefs were supported by the Quran. Because of this, bin Laden and his Mujahideen veterans offered to defend Saudi Arabia themselves instead of allowing American troops onto Saudi soil. The Saudi government said no. They relied on the U.S. military instead, and because of that, bin Laden was exiled from his own country. That exile made him even angrier. He started calling the U.S. presence for occupation of the land of the two holy places, and he repeated this phrase again and again in speeches, videos, and Al-Qaeda propaganda. Bin Laden used this issue to convince others that the United States was at war with Islam, and because he already had al-Qaeda, trained fighters, money, and connections from Afghan war, he had the power to act on that anger. From this point on, he used al-Qaeda as his weapon, shifting the group's focus towards attacking the United States. This became one of the strongest emotional and religious motivations behind 9/11. As the 1990s went on, al-Qaeda became more focused on U.S. actions in the Middle East. They were especially angry about a few things: U.S. support for Israel, economic sanctions placed on Iraq after the Gulf War, U.S. support for Middle Eastern governments that bin Laden believed were corrupt. Al-Qaeda used these issues to convince people that the United States were hurting Muslims around the world. This made it easier for them to recruit new members and justify violence. By late 1990s, Al-Qaeda had a clear plan: defeat the United States. According to the 9/11 Commission report, they had three main goals. First, they wanted to prove that the U.S. was not untouchable. That's why they targeted symbols like World Trade Center and the Pentagon. Second, they wanted to inspire others. They wanted to show that a small group could cause massive damage. Third, they wanted the U.S. to fight back. This might sound strange, but al-Qaeda wanted the U.S. to invade Afghanistan. They believed a long, exhausting war would weaken America, just like it weakened the Soviet Union. 9/11 wasn't random. It was carefully planned to change global politics. The last major cause of 9/11 wasn't beliefs, it was mistakes. Before the attacks, U.S. intelligence agencies had warning signs, but they didn't act in time. Known al-Qaeda members had entered the U.S. Some future hijackers were taking flight lessons, learning how to fly planes but not how to land them. Bin Laden had publicly threatened the U.S. multiple times. There were warnings about hijackings, and in August 2001, President Bush received a briefing titled, Bin Laden Determined to Strike in U.S. But the FBI and CIA didn't share information properly. Because of that, the attackers were able to live, train, and plan inside the United States without being stopped. The 9/11 Commission later said these intelligence failures played a major role in allowing the attacks to happen. So what caused 9/11? It wasn't one event, it wasn't one mistake, and it wasn't one reason. It was years of extreme beliefs, political conflict, planning, and ignored warning signs. Understanding these causes doesn't excuse what happened, but it helps explain how something like this was even possible. Thank you for listening.